The music swells, chandeliers sparkle, and then it happens. A CEO, a man who commands industries, is stopped dead in his tracks by the gaze of a complete stranger. Witness the magnetic force that pulls two seemingly disparate souls together in a high-stakes world where a single glance sparks an irresistible connection. The chandeliers hung like golden constellations above me, scattering light across the Harrington Charity Ball. Every surface gleamed, marble floors polished enough to see my reflection, crystal glasses clinking in practiced hands, silken gowns swaying in rhythm with the orchestra's measured waltz. The air was thick with perfume and laughter, the kind that sounded like it had been rehearsed for years. I stood pressed against the edges of it all, clutching my silver clutch until my knuckles whitened. Mireia had sworn the sapphire dress would make me shine, but in this world of jewels and airs, it felt like I had borrowed a role I didn't belong to. My shoes pinched, my smile wavered, and the more I tried to blend in, the more invisible I felt. Everywhere I looked, confidence dripped from people like perfume. Women glided across the floor with diamonds pinned into their hair, their laughter effortless and bright. Men spoke with certainty, their words threaded with power and deals I couldn't even begin to follow. I told myself I was safe in my small corner, a shadow among chandeliers, a bystander to a world that had never been mine. Mireia leaned close, her golden gown catching the light like fire. "Stop shrinking," she teased, lips brushing my ear. "No one's looking at you." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to pretend that being unseen didn't ache a little. My beauty was quiet, and in a ballroom like this, quiet went unnoticed. So I smiled. I nodded. I sipped at champagne that fizzed and burned down my throat, and I told myself I didn't mind. But then it happened. Mireia whispered something scandalous about Clarine, the heiress standing near the buffet in a jeweled gown that looked heavy enough to crush her. The words caught me off guard, and before I could stop myself, laughter burst out of me. It wasn't polished, it wasn't delicate. It was real. Too real. The sound cut across the music, bright and uncontained, and for a moment the room seemed to pause. My breath stilled in my chest. I hadn't meant to draw attention, but my laugh had slipped free like a secret escaping, and that's when I felt it. A gaze. Heavy. Steady. Pulling at me as surely as if invisible strings had caught around my shoulders. I looked up, heart hammering, and found Everett. The name struck first. Everett Landry, the one whispered in articles, the man whose empire ruled over glass towers and steel bridges. A CEO with a reputation carved in precision and ice, a man untouched by scandal or softness. He was the figure people admired from a distance, the myth made flesh. And his eyes were on me, not on Clarine with her jewels, not on Mireia, glowing gold. On me. The ballroom blurred at the edges. My clutch dug into my palm. I wanted to look away, but his gaze held me pinned, curious, sharp, like he'd heard something no one else had. Like my laugh was a note that didn't belong in the symphony, and he needed to understand why. He didn't move at first, just studied me. A faint crease in his brow as though the room had shifted without his permission. But then, slowly, deliberately, Everett began to cross the ballroom. The crowd bent around him without hesitation, conversations stalling as he passed. Whispers sparked at his back. Women tilted their heads to catch his eye, men straightened their ties in acknowledgement. But none of it mattered. His attention didn't waver. His focus stayed fixed, cutting through the glittering chaos until it landed squarely on me. My chest tightened. My breath stuttered. The chandeliers above me burned hotter, brighter, as though the whole world had decided to watch. I had spent all night trying not to be noticed, and now the most untouchable man in the room was walking toward me, gaze unbroken, intent clear. Why me? Why now? The chandeliers still scattered their patient gold across marble and mirrors, but the vector of the night had changed. The room knew it, even if most guests couldn't have said why. A laugh, unguarded, warm, the one true note in a score of rehearsed charm, had cleaved the music, and Everett's attention had followed it like iron to a magnet. That was the observable fact. Beneath it, less visible forces stirred: old hungers, private terrors, ambitions sharpened to a point. The ball resumed its rhythm, yet every measure carried the ghost of that moment when the air leaned toward a quiet girl in sapphire. Monika felt the lean and tried not to flinch. She had come as Mireya's guest, a favor repaid with a smile and a borrowed dress, planning to be gracious, grateful, invisible. In other rooms, she could manage that last skill easily. Here, it required more effort. The gowns glittered like currencies she did not trade. The jokes landed in a dialect of money and lineage. She had promised herself she would not count the ways she did not belong. She had also promised herself, secretly, in the voice she rarely used, that one day she would be seen without needing to perform, and without being punished for it. The promise felt fragile in a hall built to withstand centuries. Her dream was simple enough that it sounded naive: to be recognized as herself. Not as the friend of, not as a useful story for someone else's narrative arc, not as a surface to reflect another person's light. She wanted a gaze that looked in and stayed, not because it could use what it found, but because what it found mattered. That longing had always been yoked to a fear. If a powerful person finally looked closely, would they value the person or the leverage? She had watched enough transactions dressed up as affections to know the difference in the morning. The room's attention, skittering nervously toward her and away, felt like a rehearsal for that old nightmare. Everett stood on the far side of the chandelier's pooled brightness, outwardly composed, inwardly recalculating. His reputation had been engineered so thoroughly that strangers wore it like a lens when they looked at him. Brilliant, decisive, armored. A man who saw cities as systems and people as nodes. The lens was not entirely wrong. He had built and defended an empire by refusing to be distracted, by cutting through the sentimental story to the essential signal. But he also knew what the lens could not see: the fatigue that crept in when every room smelled the same, when every introduction arrived with an angle, when admiration felt like an invoice. He had trained himself to keep his interest on results. The cost had been a narrowing of the world until it fit inside a spreadsheet. The laugh had not fit. It was not framed or priced. It was not trying to be a door into his calendar. It was simply itself. Something in him recognized the shock of unfiltered sound and lifted its head. He tracked it, found the person who had let it loose, and found that the person did not match the room's logic. A woman at the margin, fingers tight on a silver clutch, eyes bright with a courage too honest to be ornamental. His attention, usually a discipline he wielded like a blade, behaved like a compass instead. Mireya watched both of them, and her mouth flattened into a line that meant she was about to earn her title as Monika's fiercest friend. She understood rooms like this the way sailors understand storms: beauty on the surface, riptides underneath. She had dragged Monika here hoping the night might offer a new note of possibility. She had not intended the most guarded man in the city to hear it first. Protective by habit, she shifted closer to intercept any approach that looked like a test. Her own history with men in black tie armor had taught her how charm could metastasize into damage. She would not let her friend learn that lesson on a ballroom floor. Mitchell did not miss the moment either. He prized himself on noticing micro-shifts, pivots of attention, cracklings in the lines of power, and on converting them into advantage. His rivalry with Everett predated tonight by years: hostile bids, blocked mergers, the quiet chess of proxies around mahogany tables. He believed that every fortress had a seam if you traced the stone long enough. Watching Everett's gaze settle and hold, Mitchell felt the kind of pleasure that men like him confuse with destiny. Interest was soft, he thought. Softness made seams. He murmured to an assistant without looking away, a low instruction to learn everything about the girl in blue, and lifted his glass as if toasting a discovery. Clarine tracked the same vector with a different set of instruments: social temperature, narrative control. She had curated this night to be a stage where her advantages sang pedigree, diamonds, a name that moved money like weather. By the door, she had placed herself in the path of attention and waited for the room to honor her position. It usually did. Everett's failure to follow the script read to her as a correction to be applied, not a verdict to be accepted. The anger that cooled her cheeks did so with the practiced calm of someone who thinks, "I will reframe this." Her smile sharpened by a degree. Her posture translated, "I am not threatened, I am deciding." She already understood which acquaintances preferred rumors to accuracy and which editors owed her favors. The story would bend. She would see to it. Around them, the orchestra continued its sentence, unaware or professionally indifferent. Waiters navigated with trays of sugared figs and narrow flutes. The mayor laughed at something that did not deserve the sound. A photographer widened his lens and, out of habit, included the corner where a quiet girl tried to remember how to be a small thing. The omniscient truth was simple and unkind. Everyone carried a private arithmetic into this room. Monika weighed belonging against safety. Everett weighed authenticity against control. Mireya weighed hope against the cost of protection. Mitchell weighed leverage against risk. Clarine weighed status against patience. The laugh had thrown each calculation slightly off, and the new sums had not yet settled. Monika's gaze drifted once more to Everett and found his still on her, not predatory, not even insistent, appraising in a way that felt like listening. It unnerved and steadied her at once. She remembered small scenes that had formed her fear, an internship where praise had turned to pressure in a locked office, a mentor who had traded opportunities for compliance, a relationship that had taught her exactly how affection could be repurposed into control. She had promised herself never again. The promise did not evaporate under Everett's attention. It clarified. If notice meant negotiation, she would not negotiate herself. If notice meant harm, she would step away before it arrived. If notice meant the chance to be understood, she would decide that on her terms. Everett felt the old machinery of his caution engage, and, for once, he did not fully obey it. There was risk in any deviation from routine. He catalogued it without letting the list close his hand. He had grown increasingly intolerant of the performance of interest. Lacquered laughter, eyes that skipped to the nearest camera. The laugh had not performed, the woman had not either. He did not know her name yet, but he knew the difference between a person and a proposition, and the distance between them had come to define his life. A thought moved through him with the pleasant friction of honesty. I am tired of pretending the hollow is enough. Mireya watched Monika's shoulders square and recognized resolve taking root. It was not surrender, it was choice. She adjusted her stance from shield to sentry. Whatever came, she would help her friend keep the shape of herself. Mitchell, having set inquiry in motion, let his eyes wander to Clarine and read the set of her jaw like a mutual fund prospectus. They would not need coordination yet. Parallel effort would do. One would salt the air with humiliations. The other would measure the soft target. He enjoyed the symmetry. He enjoyed it too much to notice the ways appetite narrows intelligence. Clarine turned slightly, allowing the crystals at her shoulder to throw a constellation across the floor. A young columnist near the bar saw the glitter, approached, and was met with a friendly aside that contained the seed of a narrative. The city's favorite enigma, bored by novelty, briefly entertained by an ingenue. The words were nothing, deniable, shaped like concern. The words would grow. The night flexed. Everett took a small step forward, and the people between him and the girl rearranged as though someone had extended a hand and smoothed the crowd. He did not hurry. Monika felt the adjustment ripple through her ribcage. Mireya leaned in just enough to be reached. Mitchell's mouth curved. Clarine's lashes lowered as if to shade her eyes. In truth, she was sharpening her look. Every story that would matter later was already present in miniature. A laugh that said, "I am real." A man deciding whether power could survive honesty. A friend ready to absorb the blow. A rival preparing to test the seam. An heiress set to harvest the room. The orchestra raised its phrase to a place where entries happen. The chandeliers kept their counsel. Across the polished floor, Behind all the practiced glamour, the question coalesced with the clean inevitability of a verdict arriving. Not whether a man had noticed a woman, but what each of them would make of being noticed, what it would cost, what it might repair, which part of themselves they would refuse to trade, which part they might finally risk. The gaze held. The calculations tightened. The space between them shortened like a breath taken at the brink of speech. The orchestra shifted into a waltz so lush it seemed to pull the chandeliers lower, spilling light over silk and diamonds. Everett moved without hesitation, and every ripple of the crowd bent around him as though the air had been rehearsed for his arrival. Monika felt her lungs tighten, each breath thin against the weight of so many eyes that weren't even on her yet, but would be soon. He stopped in front of her, the stillness of his frame louder than the music. The women nearest pretended to adjust their gowns. The men straightened their cuffs, but no one could mask the curiosity sharpening in their expressions. Everett Landry was not a man who crossed a ballroom for anyone. And yet here he was, gaze fixed on Monika, as if no one else existed. "Dance with me," Everett said, his words not raised but carried by a gravity that cut through every conversation. The hush was immediate, a ripple stretching across marble floors and crystal glasses. Monika's heart kicked against her ribs so hard she thought someone else might hear it. She could feel Mireya's hand tighten on her arm in silent warning, as if to ask, "Do you know what you're about to step into?" Clarine's champagne glass tilted just slightly, the liquid trembling with her grip. Her smile cracked, held together only by sheer pride. She had spent weeks crafting this night, positioning herself where Everett would see her, ensuring that she was the inevitable choice. To see him choose a woman like Monika, a name no one even whispered in their circles, was an insult she could barely swallow. Mitchell, leaning indolently near the bar, lowered his scotch with the satisfaction of a predator catching the first scent of blood. He had dreamed of Everett making a mistake, and now the man had walked straight into it. A woman plucked from obscurity, thrust into the spotlight. Mitchell knew how to twist that kind of vulnerability into ruin. Monika stood frozen, her fingers clammy against the cool silver of her clutch. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to vanish back into the safety of anonymity. She was no socialite, no heiress, no practiced player in these polished games. To dance with him here, in front of everyone, was to step into a world where she would be measured, dissected, and, inevitably, broken. And yet, Everett's hand extended, steady, waiting. His eyes did not waver. He did not blink. He looked at her as though her laugh still echoed inside him, as though she was the only person in the room worth his notice. Her decision balanced on the edge of breath. Walk away, remain invisible, and save herself from the claws of gossip, or take his hand and step willingly into the center of a world that could consume her whole. Mireya's whisper grazed her ear. "You don't owe him this." But Monika knew she owed herself something, the chance to be seen, truly seen, even if it was only for a fleeting moment. Slowly, as though testing the strength of her own courage, she placed her hand in Everett's. Gasps scattered like pearls on marble. Conversations burst in hushed fragments. A woman near the buffet murmured, "Who is she?" Another hissed, "No one important." Laughter followed, sharp and cutting, but Monika barely heard it. Everett guided her toward the dance floor. The orchestra swelled, violins soaring as if in triumph. The crowd parted in astonishment, eyes following every step as though this was a performance staged for their delight. Clarine's jeweled smile hardened, her hand curling around her glass until it nearly shattered. Mitchell's grin spread wider, his mind already cataloging opportunities. Mireya's gaze clung to Monika, torn between pride and fear. Everett's hand pressed lightly against the small of Monika's back, his other hand firm around hers. The heat of him sank through silk, steadying her trembling legs. The music carried them, his lead effortless, his steps precise. Monika followed, though her mind spun, every nerve alive with the strangeness of being in his arms. "You're trembling," Everett murmured, his voice pitched low for her alone. "Because everyone is staring," she admitted, her voice raw with honesty. "They don't matter," he said. And though it was arrogance in its purest form, something about the way he spoke made her believe it. Clarine turned away sharply, unable to stomach the sight, whispering viciously into the ear of the nearest guest. The poison spread quickly, speculation blooming. Who is she? Where did she come from? What does she want from him? Mitchell fed the fire with a single, deliberate smirk, leaning toward a pair of board members. "Mark my words," he said softly, just loud enough to be overheard. "This will end badly for him." The seed was planted, watered by envy, ready to grow. But Everett danced as though the world outside their orbit did not exist. His hand anchored Monika, his gaze never wavering, and for a heartbeat she almost believed it, that the gossip couldn't touch her, that the room might actually fade. She felt her own fear thinning, replaced by something that felt suspiciously like exhilaration. As the final notes of the waltz trembled into silence, the ballroom erupted in polite applause. Yet it was not for the orchestra. It was for the spectacle Everett had created. Everett Landry had chosen a nobody and made her visible. Monika pulled back slightly, desperate for air, her cheeks flushed. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "I don't regret it," Everett replied. His hand lingered at her waist, his eyes searching hers with quiet intensity. "And I don't intend for this to end here. I want to see you again." Her breath caught. That was not part of the bargain she'd told herself she was making. A dance was fleeting, it could be forgotten by morning. But this was a thread pulled loose, threatening to unravel everything. She stepped back, her heart pounding with equal parts terror and longing. Around her, whispers snapped like brittle glass. Clarine's eyes glittered with fury. Mitchell's smirk deepened into something sharper, more dangerous. Mireya's expression hardened, silently urging Monika to think before leaping. Everett had set the stage. Now Monika had to decide, let the moment end, or let it begin something that could rewrite her life. Why her? Why now? Why not walk away? And why, against every warning in her bones, did she already know she would say yes? The ballroom's murmurs still echoed in Monika's ears long after the final notes of the orchestra faded. She felt their gazes cling like silk threads as Everett guided her from the floor, his hand firm at her back. Whispers snaked behind them, hungry and cruel. She forced herself to smile, though her chest burned with unease. This moment was meant to be fleeting, she told herself. One dance, a single spectacle that would soon be forgotten. Yet Everett had leaned down, his voice so low only she could hear, and said, "I want to see you again." The words haunted her all through the night. Days later, Monika sat at her small kitchen table, tracing the rim of her teacup as Mireya paced across the room. "He's serious," Mireya said, throwing her hands in the air. "Everett Landry doesn't chase, he doesn't ask, and he asked you. You're going to dinner with him, tonight." Monika pressed her lips together, uncertainty biting deeper than excitement. "What if it's a game, Mireya? What if I'm just a distraction to him?" Her friend stopped and crouched beside her, eyes softening. "Then you walk away. But what if you're not? What if this is the thing you've been waiting for? The chance to be seen? Really seen?" The thought made Monika's chest ache. She wanted it too much. That evening, Everett's car arrived like a shadow lined in steel. The city lights spilled across its gleaming surface, and when Monika stepped inside, her pulse stumbled. He sat across from her, his dark suit sharp, his expression softened by something she hadn't expected. Nervousness, quiet, but real. "I know it's unconventional," Everett began, his voice steady but low. "But I didn't want that dance to be the last moment. I wanted more." She met his gaze, searching for cracks. "More, as in a headline? A story for the board to chew on?" His jaw tightened, but his eyes did not flinch. More, as in you. The car carried them through the glittering city until it stopped outside a quiet restaurant tucked away from flashing cameras. Inside, the lights were warm, the tables intimate. No reporters, no society eyes, only them. As courses passed, roasted lamb, wine rich as velvet, delicate pastries that melted on the tongue, Everett surprised her. He listened. He asked questions not about her connections or her lineage, but about her life, about her dreams, her fears, the books she read when the world was too much. He leaned forward when she spoke, as though each word carried weight. For the first time, Monika saw past the steel of his public mask. She saw the man beneath, weary of pretense, hungry for something real. But shadows lingered, even in the candlelight. Clarine's fury spread quickly after the ball. Her whispers grew into stories, each one sharpened like a blade. She told anyone who would listen that Monika was a fortune hunter, a nobody clinging to Everett's name. She painted her as an opportunist, a woman who had orchestrated that laugh to catch his attention. Soon, the rumors slipped into glossy magazines, framing Monika as a manipulator. Mitchell watched with interest as Clarine's venom took root. But he wasn't content with gossip alone. He hired a private investigator, a man skilled in shadows, and set him on Monika. "Find me something," Mitchell ordered, his voice slick with triumph. "Everyone has a weakness. Bring me hers." The investigator's eyes gleamed. "And if she doesn't?" "Then we create one," Mitchell replied, raising his glass in a toast to his own cruelty. Meanwhile, Monika felt the whispers gnawing at her peace. Mireya shoved magazines into the trash, her face twisted with anger. "They don't know you, Moni. They don't get to define you." But at night, when Monika lay alone, doubt crept in. Was Everett sincere? Or would he discard her once the rumors grew inconvenient? Was she being toyed with, dangled as entertainment until something shinier came along? Each dinner with Everett deepened the tension inside her. He showed her sides no one else saw, soft laughter when she teased him about his rigid schedule, quiet grief when he spoke of parents long gone, restless honesty when he admitted how empty success had become. He reached for her hand across white tablecloths, his thumb tracing circles that sent fire through her veins. Yet even as her heart leaned toward him, her mind whispered caution. One night, Everett invited her to his penthouse, a space perched above the city with walls of glass that turned skyscrapers into jewels. The air smelled faintly of cedar and rain. "This is where I live," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "But it doesn't feel like home. Not until you walked in." Her chest tightened, her instincts battling between belief and fear. She turned toward the glittering skyline, arms wrapped around herself. "I don't want to be a chapter, Everett, a story for people like Clarine to laugh about. If this is a game, tell me now." His silence stretched. When she finally looked back, his eyes were raw, stripped of every layer of armor. "This isn't a game," he said, stepping closer. "But I can't prove it with words. Only time. Only what I choose every day when I choose you." Her heart lurched, but doubt still clung. Could she trust him? Far below, shadows moved. Mitchell's investigator had followed her from her apartment, camera lens flashing briefly as Monika stepped into Everett's penthouse. He noted her nervous glance, her hesitant smile. He sent photos with clipped messages. She's in deep. Vulnerable. He's exposed. Mitchell smiled coldly when the files arrived. "Perfect. When the time comes, I'll tear them apart. She'll be ruined and he'll bleed for it." The tension wound tighter with every passing day. Monika felt the invisible eyes on her as she walked the streets, as if someone were watching, waiting. Mireya urged caution, begged her to step back before it was too late. But Monika couldn't. Everett had become a gravity she couldn't escape, even when fear pressed heavy in her chest. Everett sensed her unease. One evening, over dinner in a quiet corner of the city, he reached across the table, his voice low and earnest. I know the world is cruel. I know they'll come after you because of me. But I need you to believe. I am not them. I will fight for you. I'll prove it. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. And what if I can't survive being wrong about you? He squeezed her hand. Then I'll carry the weight. Not you. Still, the shadows pressed closer. At the next charity gala, Monika could feel the eyes, the whispers sharper than ever. Clarine glided past, her smile gleaming with poison, murmuring loud enough for nearby guests. Poor Everett. He doesn't even see how she's using him. Laughter rippled, cruel and knowing. Monika's chest constricted, the humiliation biting deep. She slipped into the garden for air, trembling as tears blurred the golden lights. From the shadows, a camera clicked. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. The night stretched wide over the city, jeweled with lights that blinked against the velvet dark. From Everett's penthouse, the world looked small, like a board game he could manipulate with a single hand. But Monika, standing at the wall of glass, didn't feel powerful. She felt exposed. The skyline reflected her face back at her. A quiet woman in a sapphire dress, too ordinary for this life, too uncertain to belong. Behind her, Everett poured 2 glasses of wine. His voice, calm as ever, carried the weight of someone used to control. You've been quiet tonight. She turned, forcing a smile. I don't always have something worth saying. He set the glasses down, walked closer. His gaze held hers with a sharpness that stripped away pretense. That's not true. When you speak, you mean it. That's why I can't stop listening. Her heart faltered. It was the kind of line she wanted to believe, but doubt curled inside her. She reached for her glass, needing the anchor, but Everett caught her hand. There's something I should tell you, he said, and for the first time, hesitation cracked his voice. Something you deserve to know. The air tightened. Monika waited, bracing. My board, he began, pacing a slow circle as though choosing each word with care. They've been pressuring me for months. They want stability. They want me to appear settled, grounded, in order to finalize the biggest deal of my career. Billions are at stake, Monika. Entire industries. He stopped, his eyes finding hers again. When they saw me with you, they assumed you were that answer, the proof they'd been demanding. The wine glass slipped in her grip, nearly shattering. Her voice broke sharp. So what are you saying? That you needed a woman at your side, and I happened to laugh at the right moment? His expression tightened with pain. No, that's not what Isn't it? She stepped back, fury and humiliation flaring hot. All this, dinners, whispers, us, was it ever real? Or am I just your convenience? Silence roared between them. He closed the space in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders with urgency. You think I can fake what I feel with you? His voice cracked now, stripped of composure. I don't feel alive in boardrooms. I don't feel alive in ballrooms. I feel alive here, with you. Tears blurred her vision, anger and longing warring inside her. She wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into the truth in his voice, but the doubt clawed hard. If his board demanded proof, wasn't she just that? A prop? A shield? A tool? She pulled away, her body trembling. I can't be your strategy, Everett. I won't. His eyes burned. You're not. You're the one thing I haven't had to calculate. Her breath shuddered, caught between breaking and believing. While they struggled with the truth, Mitchell sharpened his knives. He had been waiting, watching, and now the opportunity was perfect. Rumors had already spread like wildfire, fed by Clarine's venom, but Mitchell wanted blood. At a crowded investors' luncheon, his voice cut through the air like silk dipped in poison. I'm concerned for Everett, he told a circle of eager ears. He's brilliant, of course, but we all know brilliance can be distracted. Have you seen the girl he's parading? No pedigree, no power, just a face plucked from obscurity. If this is his judgment now, how safe are our billions? Gasps and murmurs fed him. Someone scribbled notes. Another whispered that the girl must be after his fortune. Mitchell smiled thinly, satisfaction warming him like fire. By the time dessert was served, Monika's name was on every tongue. Monika didn't hear of it until Mireya stormed into her apartment, eyes blazing. She slapped a magazine down on the table. The headline screamed back at her, "Billionaire CEO's new romance, a business move?" Sources question motives. Below, her picture, taken without her knowledge, splashed across the page. Her smile had been caught mid-laugh, twisted now to mockery. Monika's stomach dropped. Oh God. They're saying you're his pawn, Moni, that you're with him because it makes him look stable, and you get the perks. It's everywhere. The internet is tearing you apart. Mireya's voice shook with rage. You can't let them do this to you. Monika pressed her hands to her face, shame burning deep. This was her fear realized, to be used, to be defined by lies she couldn't outrun. I told you, she whispered. I told you I was nothing but a convenience. Mireya's jaw tightened. Then make him prove you're not. That night, Everett arrived at her door, his suit disheveled, his eyes shadowed. He held the magazine in his hand, his jaw a clenched line of fury. Mitchell, he spat. He's behind this. Monika folded her arms, trying to steady herself. Are they wrong, Everett? Am I just here because you needed to look good for them? His face twisted with anguish. He stepped closer, his voice low and raw. If I cared about appearances, I would have chosen Clarine months ago. She's perfect for them. Perfect pedigree. Perfect history. But I don't want perfect. I want you. Her breath shook, caught between the ache of betrayal and the pull of his words. I know you're scared, he said, softer now. But I swear to you, Monika, you're the only real thing in my life. Without you, all of this. He gestured at his suit, his empire, the glittering skyline, is just numbers, empty. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head. And if I stay? If I believe you? What happens when they push harder? When Mitchell drags me lower, will you still choose me? His answer came without hesitation. Every time. She broke then, her sobs slipping into his chest as his arms folded around her. The world outside might not believe him, but in that moment, she did. But Mitchell wasn't finished. He escalated, feeding reporters documents, twisting half-truths into weapons. At a public conference, he stood with feigned concern and declared, Everett Landry's judgment is compromised. His relationship is a liability. The cameras drank it in, and by evening, Monika's reputation was shredded further. When she saw the footage, humiliation seared through her veins. She slammed the laptop shut, her whole body trembling. I can't survive this, Everett, she whispered when he came to her. They're tearing me apart. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her tears. Then let them tear me apart instead. I'll take the fire. I won't let them burn you. His voice broke on the last words, and Monika saw it, the truth in his eyes, the desperation that could not be faked. He wasn't protecting a deal. He was protecting her. Her heart split wide, caught between fear and love. She didn't know how this war would end, but she knew this. She was no longer just a pawn. She was his choice, and she had to decide if she would stand beside him or let the world tear them both down. The gala glittered brighter than the others, a jewel of the season, hosted in a ballroom draped with velvet curtains and crowned with chandeliers that spilled light like rivers of fire. Guests poured in, sequins flashing, jewels burning against pale skin. Monika had dreaded it all day, but Everett had asked her to come, his voice steady, his hand warm as he'd promised. They need to see us together. They need to know what you mean to me. She had wanted to believe him. She had even let Mireya style her hair, a cascade of dark curls pinned with a simple silver comb. Her gown shimmered soft blue, chosen not for extravagance, but for the way it let her feel like herself. Yet the moment she entered on Everett's arm, the weight of eyes pressed in, sharp, cutting, greedy for her stumble. Whispers began immediately, snakes curling through the air. "She's the one? That?" Laughter followed, hidden behind jeweled hands and glasses of champagne. Monika held her head high, even as the heat of humiliation burned beneath her skin. Clarine glided forward first, her gown a masterpiece of emerald and diamonds. Her smile gleamed with cruelty dressed as charm. "Everett," she purred, her gaze sweeping over Monika like a blade. "You've brought your companion." She let the word linger, dipped in venom, then leaned in just enough to whisper, but loud enough to be overheard. "How thoughtful of you to take pity. A charity case at a charity gala, how poetic." Gasps circled, laughter rippled, and Monika's stomach twisted. Everett stiffened beside her, but before he could respond, Mitchell arrived. His timing was perfect, his smirk cutting, his voice pitched to carry. "I must commend you, Everett," Mitchell said, his glass lifted in mock salute. "Always one step ahead. Who better to distract the public from a shaky deal than a woman plucked from obscurity? A tragic Cinderella story, I almost admire the strategy." The room erupted in a low hum of agreement, whispers feeding like fire on dry grass. Monika's face flushed crimson, her heart hammering as every eye devoured her humiliation. Everett's jaw clenched, fury sparking in his gaze, but Monika felt the ground split beneath her. Strategy, pawn, prop. The words lodged like knives. She stepped back, her voice shaking. "Is that what I am, Everett? Tell me now, in front of them all. Am I just your convenience?" The silence was brutal. Everett's eyes blazed, desperate. But the crowd's laughter drowned his truth. And Monika, drowning in shame, made her choice. She tore her hand from his and walked away. Outside, the night air cut sharp against her burning skin. Her heels clattered against marble steps as she fled, tears threatening but refusing to fall. She had given him her trust, fragile and trembling, and now she was the butt of every whisper, every cruel smirk. She couldn't stay. She couldn't be his pawn. Mireya found her at the edge of the street, breathless, hair tumbling loose. "Moni, wait." "No." Monika's voice broke. "I can't do this anymore. I won't." Mireya's eyes softened with sorrow. "Then walk away. But don't let them destroy the truth of who you are." Monika nodded, but her chest felt hollow, her heart fractured. Inside, Everett stood frozen in the echo of her absence. The gala continued around him, the music resuming, laughter swelling, but he couldn't hear any of it. His world had gone silent the moment Monika's hand slipped from his. Mitchell's smirk widened. "Looks like your centerpiece has resigned." Everett turned on him, eyes dark. "Enjoy your victory, Mitchell. It's the last one you'll have." But the words rang hollow even to him. He had built his empire brick by brick, never faltering, never needing. Tonight, for the first time, he realized all of it meant nothing without her. The skyscrapers, the wealth, the power. It was hollow. Empty. Clarine approached, her smile falsely sympathetic. "You could have avoided this, Everett. You could have chosen someone who belonged." He didn't answer. He walked past her, past the glittering crowd, his shoulders heavy with defeat. In the days that followed, the world sharpened its knives. Headlines mocked Monika as Everett's charity fling, his pawn, his distraction. Paparazzi camped outside her small apartment, cameras flashing whenever she stepped out for air. She stopped answering calls, stopped opening blinds. Everett sent flowers, messages, calls unanswered. He stood outside her door once, his voice breaking as he said, "I don't care what they say. I care about you." But the door never opened. Alone in his penthouse, he stared at the skyline he once commanded. The city no longer bent to his will. His board demanded answers, whispered of instability, threatened to reconsider deals. But Everett didn't care. Without Monika, the empire he'd bled for was meaningless. Nights stretched long, empty glasses littering tables, his reflection hollow in the glass walls. He replayed every moment, the laugh that had undone him, the dinners that had softened him, the look in her eyes when she asked if she was just a strategy. He had failed her, not with lies, but with silence. He hadn't protected her. He hadn't been enough. Monika, too, wrestled with emptiness. She tried to return to her routines, but every whisper, every headline followed her like a shadow. At the market, she heard strangers murmur, "That's her." At night, she stared at the ceiling, her chest aching with what she had lost. She remembered the way Everett had looked at her as if she was the only person who mattered. She remembered his voice, low and raw. "I feel alive only when I'm with you." But those words warred with the memory of Mitchell's smirk, Clarine's cruelty, the laughter of the crowd. Had Everett chosen her for love? Or had she been the answer to a problem he couldn't solve any other way? The doubt gnawed, and so she stayed away. Everett reached his breaking point one late night when his board gathered, voices sharp and cold. "Your judgment is compromised, Everett," one said. "The girl has made you a liability," another added. "Step back, or we will." He stood, his hands braced on the table, and for the first time in years, he didn't argue. He didn't care. "Do what you want," he said quietly. "Without her, none of it matters." He walked out, leaving his empire trembling behind him. For both of them, the world had become impossible. He was the untouchable billionaire, and she was the nobody who had dared to laugh too loudly. Their worlds did not meet. They collided, and the wreckage was all that remained. Monika curled on her couch, heart heavy as rain battered the windows. Everett sat in his penthouse, staring at the skyline, seeing only shadows. They were two souls bound by something undeniable, yet ripped apart by a world too cruel to let them stay. For now, hope was gone. Love was lost. And the silence between them was the loudest sound either had ever known. Have you ever walked away from someone you loved because the world around you made it feel impossible to stay? Would you have fought or let go? Share in the comments. Rain sheeted across the city, blurring glass towers into shadows. Monika sat by her window, watching droplets race down the pane. Each beat against the glass echoed the weight in her chest. She had walked away, certain she'd saved herself from being a pawn, yet the emptiness that followed felt worse than humiliation. She hadn't just left Everett, she'd abandoned the chance to believe in something that might have been real. Her phone buzzed endlessly with news alerts, articles still branding her Everett's charity case fling. She silenced it, but the words clung like burrs. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "You will never belong in his world." For days she let that voice rule, let it keep her small, unseen, safe. But as the rain poured, Monika's reflection stared back, tired, hollow, yet stubborn. She thought of Maria's words. Don't let them destroy the truth of who you are. She wasn't weak. She wasn't a pawn. If the world wanted to laugh, let it. Her worth couldn't be defined by whispers in marble ballrooms. And if Everett had truly loved her, she couldn't run from that either. For the first time in days, she inhaled deep, steady. Courage wasn't about silencing fear. It was about standing anyway. Across the city, Everett sat alone in his penthouse, the skyline stretching like a battlefield of glass. His empire trembled beneath Mitchell's poison, investors wavering, deals teetering, board members circling like vultures. None of it mattered. He'd spent his life chasing stability, reputation, power. But all of it was ash without Monika. He replayed the gala in his mind, her hand slipping from his, the break in her voice when she asked if she was just convenience. He had failed her. Not because he'd lied, but because he hadn't fought hard enough to protect her. He had let her face the fire alone. Everett pressed his palms against the glass wall, staring down at the streets below. "What is all this worth?" he whispered. "If she's not in it with me?" The answer rang clear. Nothing. And with that truth came resolve. He would risk it all. Reputation, wealth, power, to prove his love wasn't a strategy. He would fight for her, not as the Everett Landry the world revered, but as a man stripped of everything but truth. 2 nights later, Monika heard the knock. She opened her door to find Everett standing soaked from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead, his suit ruined, his eyes raw. "I shouldn't be here," he said, breathless, "but I can't stay away." She froze, clutching the doorframe. "Everett!" He stepped closer, desperation breaking through every polished edge. "I was wrong, Monika. Not about loving you, I was wrong about protecting you. I thought I could shield you with silence, with strength. But I left you to face their cruelty alone. I failed you." Her throat tightened. "And what am I, Everett? Tell me now. Am I convenience? Am I just your answer to a boardroom problem?" His voice cracked. "You are the only part of my life that isn't strategy. When I'm with you, I don't feel like a CEO or a name on a magazine cover. I feel like a man, alive, real. And I can lose everything else, the deals, the empire, the respect of men like Mitchell, but I cannot lose you." Tears slipped hot down her cheeks. He reached for her hand, tentative, trembling. "Please, Monika, I love you, not as a solution, not as a symbol, as you." For a long moment, the rain was the only sound. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. Vulnerability met vulnerability. 2 fractured souls daring to believe in something stronger. She whispered, "If we do this, Everett, it has to be together. No more secrets. No more silence." He nodded, his forehead pressing to hers. Together, always. But even as love reclaimed its fragile ground, danger tightened its grip. Mitchell, enraged by Everett's defiance, unleashed his final strike. He leaked confidential documents twisted into false narratives, painting Everett as corrupt, reckless, unfit to lead. At the same time, a smear campaign targeted Monika directly, fabricated pasts, falsified debts, stories branding her a schemer who had trapped a billionaire. Headlines blazed, Everett Landry's fortune at risk. All for a woman? The city buzzed with scandal. Stocks dipped. The board called emergency meetings. The empire trembled, closer than ever to collapse. And at the heart of it, Monika and Everett stood side by side, their love no longer hidden but tested against fire. For Everett, the choice was clear. He would not sacrifice her to save his crown. He would sacrifice the crown itself. The evening of the celebration gala arrived draped in opulence. The Grand Regent Hotel had been transformed into a glittering palace of glass and polished wood, chandeliers raining golden light over the city's most powerful. The air buzzed with champagne, murmured alliances and anticipation. This was no ordinary gathering. It was a night to toast the massive corporate deal Everett's company had secured, the kind of triumph that drew investors, executives, and their partners from every corner of the industry. Everett adjusted his cufflinks, but for once he wasn't thinking about projections or contracts. He was thinking about Monika, how her eyes had shone even when filled with doubt, how her laughter had cut through the noise of the world, how her hand had fit into his as if it had been waiting for his all along. When he called her that morning, his voice carried no armor. "Monika," he said, quiet but certain, "I need you with me tonight, not for strategy. Not for appearances, for me." There was silence on the line, the kind that felt like eternity. Then she whispered, "If I come, Everett, it's as myself, not as your mask." His chest tightened. "No masks, just us." They entered the ballroom together, Monika's arm in his. The whispers began immediately, hissing through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. She felt their stares, the way they measured her gown, simple but elegant, the way they searched for cracks in her composure. But Monika held her chin high, her courage steady. If she was to be judged, she would not shrink. Mitchell stood near the dais, smiling as though the night already belonged to him. His tailored suit gleamed under the chandeliers, his voice rich with false concern when he took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "tonight we celebrate victory. But celebration should never blind us to danger. Leadership, after all, must remain steady, untainted." He gestured, and a screen lit up behind him, displaying photographs of Monika, leaving her modest apartment, dining with Everett, standing in the rain with tears streaking her face. Words flashed beneath: schemer, pawn, gold digger. Gasps rippled. Guests leaned forward, some exchanging knowing glances. Mitchell pressed the knife deeper. "This is the woman Everett Landry has chosen to bring into our world. A woman with no pedigree, no assets, no place among us. Is this love, or is it recklessness endangering everything we've built?" Monika's cheeks burned, but she didn't flinch. Not this time. She'd walked away once, and it had nearly broken her. She would not cower again. Everett rose from his seat, slow and deliberate, his gaze locking on Mitchell. "Are you finished?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. Mitchell's smile widened. "Merely presenting facts." "Facts?" Everett stepped forward, his presence filling the room. "What you've shown are fragments twisted into lies. What you've called weakness, I call strength. What you label as nothing, I see as everything." The room stilled. Everett turned, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. "Yes, I love Monika. Not because she gives me an advantage, not because she is a strategy, because she is the only thing in my life that isn't strategy. She is my truth, and if you believe that makes me unfit to lead, then take it all. I will not trade her for this empire." Gasps broke through the silence, louder this time. Investors murmured, some scandalized, others stunned by the raw honesty of a man who had never faltered in public. Cameras flashed, capturing his every word. Mitchell laughed, sharp and triumphant. "You hear him? He admits it. He's blinded by a fling. He's throwing away billions for sentiment. This company needs strength, not weakness parading as love." Before Everett could reply, a new voice rang out. "Funny you should mention weakness, Mitchell." She slapped the folder onto the table by the stage, pages spilling out. Bank records, emails, contracts. "Here's the truth. Mitchell's been siphoning funds through shell corporations, manipulating reports, bleeding the very company he claims to protect. He set Monika up as a distraction while he lined his pockets." The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, reporters scrambling to capture every word. Mitchell's face drained of color. "Lies!" he barked, but the evidence was already being passed from hand to hand, eyes widening as the proof stared back. "You wanted to talk about compromise?" Mireya's voice cut like steel. "Look in the mirror." Executives whispered furiously, some already turning away from Mitchell. The balance of power had shifted. Everett seized the moment. "This company doesn't need deceit. It doesn't need men who prey on weakness and call it strength. It needs truth. And if you want me to lead, know this. I will lead with her by my side." He turned to Monika, his voice breaking as he reached for her hand. "Not as a prop, not as an accessory, as my equal. Monika, will you stand with me? Not just tonight, but for whatever future comes?" The room held its breath. Cameras flashed. Monika's eyes filled with tears, her heart pounding, but her voice rang clear. "Yes, I'll stand with you. Always." The applause began hesitantly, then grew, swelling until it thundered through the hall. Reporters shouted questions, executives demanded Mitchell's removal, but in the center of it all, Everett and Monika held each other's gaze, the storm around them nothing compared to the peace between them. For the first time, Monika didn't feel like she was being used. She felt chosen, not as a pawn, but as a partner, And Everett, stripped of his empire's illusions, felt what he had craved all along: alive, real, whole. If love forced you to risk everything you've built, would you gamble it all for the one person who made you feel alive? Tell me in the comments. The world quieted after the storm. Days had passed since the gala, since Mitchell's fall, and the public declaration that had left cameras flashing and the air thick with disbelief. I had stood before everyone, shareholders, rivals, investors, journalists, and said what I never thought I'd dare to: that Monika was my truth. Not a mask, not a strategy. My truth. And she had said yes. Even now, as I sat in the library of my penthouse, the city glittering beyond the wide glass windows, I could still hear her voice, clear, certain, unshaken. Yes, I'll stand with you. Always. It should have felt like victory. My empire was safe, Mitchell ruined, the board scrambling to align behind me once more. The world had finally seen me bleed, and yet somehow I'd never felt stronger. But none of that mattered compared to the woman moving quietly in the kitchen, humming under her breath as she poured tea into chipped mugs I hadn't realized she'd smuggled from her apartment. Her life before me. She hadn't abandoned it all. She'd brought pieces with her, grounding me in the reminder that she wasn't here for what I had built. She was here for me. I rose from the leather chair and leaned in the doorway, watching her. The soft lamplight caught her hair, burnishing it into strands of gold and chestnut. She didn't belong to the world of glittering chandeliers or boardroom wars, and yet, perhaps that was why she fit me better than anyone ever had. She turned, catching me staring. Her lips curved. "You're doing it again." Doing what? My voice was softer than I intended. Looking at me like I'm going to disappear. I crossed the room before I realized I'd moved. My hand found her cheek, my thumb brushing the faintest trace of flour from her skin. "I'm terrified you might. You've seen what my world is, Monika. Cruel, loud, hungry. And you..." My throat tightened. "You deserve peace." She shook her head gently, slipping her hand over mine. "Peace isn't the absence of storms, Everett. It's knowing who stands with you when the storm hits. And I've made my choice." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The man who had conquered mergers and board takeovers, who had stared down titans without blinking, was undone by a woman in my kitchen, telling me I was worth choosing. I kissed her then, slow, reverent, a vow written against her lips. No cameras, no audience, no empire watching, just us. The days that followed were different. The world expected more balls, more appearances, more headlines. But I found myself hungry for something else. One morning, we left the city altogether. I drove without telling her where, watching curiosity chase across her features as the skyscrapers gave way to winding roads and the air grew clearer. By noon, we were at the lake house I hadn't visited in years. My father had built it, but I had avoided it. A reminder of a boy I once was, of expectations that had weighed too heavy. The house smelled faintly of cedar and dust, but Monika's laughter filled it within minutes, chasing the ghosts out. She wandered barefoot across the porch, her dress fluttering in the breeze, and turned back to me with wonder in her eyes. "This," she whispered. "This feels like home." And it struck me then, the truth I had been circling all along. Not that I needed her to stand by me in the Empire's wars, but that I wanted to build a life with her where victory wasn't measured in contracts or power, where love was not performance but presence. I joined her on the porch, the lake stretching wide and still before us, reflecting a sky free of storm. My arm slipped around her waist, and for once I didn't feel like the world's weight was pressing down. "Stay with me here," I murmured. "Not forever. Not instead of the city. Just enough to remind me what's real." She leaned into me, her head against my shoulder. "Everett, you've always known what's real. You just didn't trust it could be yours." Her words settled into me, a truth I couldn't deny. I had spent my life mastering walls and weapons, hiding my wounds behind power. But she had seen through every mask, and still, she had chosen me. Weeks later, I stood again before my board, but it was different this time. No theatrics, no battles. I spoke of growth, of future plans, of the company's next steps. They listened, some wary, some grudgingly admiring, but my gaze drifted often to the woman waiting outside, reading a book as though empires did not rise or fall within these walls. And when the meeting ended, when deals were struck and futures plotted, it wasn't applause or approval that mattered. It was stepping out of that room and finding her there, looking up with a smile that made the day's victories feel pale by comparison. One evening, months after the gala, we hosted friends. Not executives or rivals, just people we wanted near. Mireya sat at our table, laughter freer now that Mitchell's shadow no longer lingered. Clarine's name no longer carried weight in our circles. Her schemes had collapsed without Mitchell's scaffolding. And Monika, radiant in the soft glow of candlelight, moved among them with ease. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She belonged, not because I had declared it, but because she had claimed it for herself. Later, when the dishes were done and the house was quiet, I pulled her close in the stillness of our room. "You've changed everything," I told her. She shook her head, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "No, Everett, you changed. You finally let someone see you. That's the man I love, not the empire, not the name. Just you." Her words undid me all over again. For so long, I had believed love was conditional, tethered to power, wealth, appearance. But in her eyes, I saw no condition, no bargain, just love. The story of us didn't end in a ballroom, or in front of cameras, or at some glittering gala. It continued in the quiet places, sharing coffee before the sun rose, walking through markets with our hands entwined, falling asleep tangled in sheets that smelled of cedar and lake air. I had thought empires were built in boardrooms, but love, real love, was built in these small, ordinary moments. And for the first time in my life, I felt I had built something unshakable. Would you risk everything? Reputation, wealth, security, for love? Tell us in the comments.